All right, folks. We are joined tonight by the legendary, best-selling author of an excellent book that defends Jameis Winston from the people in the mainstream media who look to defame his name and spread false narratives. An absolute king in the state of Florida, Jameis One of One. Jameis One of One, how are you, man?
Real good. That was quite a introduction there, brother.
Yeah, you got it, man. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For starters, the first thing we were wondering, man, are you a Bucs fan or are you just like a big Jameis fan?
No, I'm not a Bucks fan. I wasn't a Florida State fan. I'm just a guy really that studies quarterbacks. And I have a rooting interest, so to speak, in every game. So I can enjoy every game just because of the players that I study and that I like and follow. You could call me a huge Jameis fan, but I'm also, I'm a big Carson Wentz fan, Matthew Stafford. I mean, there's a lot of guys that I like, follow. I don't have a Jameis jersey or anything like that, so I don't really consider myself a fan. It's just that I consider him, the most slighted and slighted and slandered back in history, and also the most interesting guy to study, both on the field and off the field. I mean, he's just an interesting character study.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's exactly the right description. Of all the case studies, I think he's a super interesting case study as terms of all the highs and lows on the variance of his quarterback. Can you talk to me about how exactly you evaluate Jameis with all the highs and lows, considering that there's not many other quarterbacks that can compare to the variance that he puts out on the stat sheet on the field?
Well, sure. I started studying Jameis, his freshman year there at Florida State. My son and I watched his first game against Pittsburgh, and that first just was legendary in and of itself. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just keep studying this kid. But most quarterbacks, that you see in college, even the ones that look amazing, they never pan out. Let alone when you go back to high school. Trevor Lawrence is a guy I've been following since high school. And he looks like he'll pan out. But most of these guys that are, the number one quarterback in high school, they don't even make it to the NFL. And if they do, they bust out quick. So Jameis, he's been the man really every step of the way. I mean, he started playing football at like 4. He was calling audibles in Pop Warner. He was the number one quarterback coming out of high school. He won the Elite 11 MVP. The youngest winner ever. The youngest guy to win a national title as a day one starter ever. Number one draft pick, the youngest Pro Bowl quarterback in NFL history. The only quarterback to start his career with back-to-back 4,000-yard seasons in history. So he's just progressed all along. When you look at him, if you were to just evaluate last year, that's a strange season. He had 30 interceptions, which is an anomaly for him. He had never thrown more than 18 before that. So just looking at last year, it is a weird season to sort of evaluate. And he even spoke to that in an interview toward the end of the year where he just said a lot of strange things happened this year. And Chris Godwin went on First Take and said that, he actually said, quote, of Jameis's interceptions weren't on Jameis. So he's just always been a fascinating player to study, going back as far as you can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So why do you think it is that the national media hates Jameis Winston so much? Do you think there's anything that he did, or why do you think they're so fierce in digging in their claws into his legacy and his career so far?
Yeah, it's been going on really since even before he got to Florida State, which a lot of people don't know. But Jameis was sort of attacked even when he was in high school. There was a lot of hate against him. They tried to bend some rules to prevent him from playing. He was playing both baseball and football at the same time. And, he got some death threat type stuff and hate mail when he chose Florida State over Alabama because he's a Bama kid. Everybody thought for sure he'd go to Bama, and he didn't. He sort of bucked the trend and went his own way, and people hated him for that. So he's used to that. I mean, he's always been sort of, slighted, slandered, persecuted, etc. As far as the media goes, they're not really in the business of reporting the truth. And they're also not really in the business of doing deep research or deep analysis. Most of it is all very shallow. And they build both heroes and they also build villains. And it isn't even that much different than, people that are into wrestling and stuff. I mean, I haven't seen wrestling since back in, the day where Hogan and Warrior and, those guys were around. But it's almost like where the media they set up, the guys that they want people to like, and they tear down the others. And Kyrie Irving is a good example right now. It's a very strange dynamic that's going on with him, where Wojnarowski, can tweet out basically that, he's a troublemaker, and then Chris Haynes can tweet out that, he's a leader. And you see this where some people are trying to tear him down and turn him into a villain, and other people are trying to hold him up as an outside-the-box thinker that is, trying to do the right thing. Whereas with Jameis, there are people in the media. There's quite a few, actually. There's quite a few people in the media that know how Jameis stacks up to all the Hall of Famers. They know what type of statistical pace he's on. They know he's legit. But they also know that to say that, they're going to get laughed at, they're going to get called out, they're going to get clowned. So they just keep their mouth shut. I mean, I've had many wonderful conversations through DMs and emails and the like with media members, and they all know. But they're like, we're not dying on that hill. We're not going to bat for Jameis. We're not going to do it. Because and peer pressure is a big thing in the media too. You watch the talking head shows, and once a guy gets rolling and starts attacking a player, the other people on the panel, they usually just go along with it. There's very little actual debate. The debates that do take place on shows like First Take, they're staged. They're all set up. They have a talking point, they have producers, and they're set up staged debates. They're not real. So I've had real debates with people, both online and on interviews and things like that, and those are real. And I'll crush anybody that wants to debate on Jameis, and all the people in the media know that, because their debates are fake. They're staged and they're fake.
So if I sat here and
Uh-oh. Looks like Matt decided to talk and he cut out. I know Matt's a big stat guy, but I've seen you crush people in the media. I've seen your clip with like Barstool Big Cat and whatnot. Like I've seen you go toe-to-toe with these people, and it's actually kind of funny because they can't really debate with you because you have all the advanced stats. So how do you think with Jameis, and what do you think in terms of players? Because I've seen this with Giants fans with Odell Beckham, how he carries the team to the playoffs in 2016, and they just bash on him. Why do you think it is that media members and whatnot don't do more research on players?
A lot of it really, it isn't really their fault. A lot of them, they're told to talk on 20, 30, 40 subjects a day. They simply don't have the time to really research things. Now, they do have researchers, but I don't really know what those guys are doing either. I don't really know how they earn their money, because I'll hear sometimes give a shout-out to a researcher, and I'm thinking, what did he do? Because you didn't come with anything good, And but they talk on so many subjects that they can't be an expert really on any of them. They can only be actors, and that's really what most of the media talking heads are today. Is they're just paid actors. They're personalities. They're there to spin a story and to get people to like them or even to hate them. Hate sells too. Skip Bayless made a career out of sort of being the heel, contrarian, and sort of the blithering idiot on a show. And I'm not really trying to kill him for it, because he's been very successful at it. But that was his shtick, is to just be the contrarian and say outlandish, absurd things. And so these people, they're actors. That's really what they are, and don't have deep analysis. They don't have deep research, so they can't really even get into a serious debate. And if somebody does bring up a really good point that they can't handle, you'll see them start laughing loudly or try to talk over them, or because none of these guys really know how to debate at a high level. And the ones that do, I would say Max Kellerman, Will Kane. There's a couple guys that you can see they're adequate debaters. They can do it, but these shows don't really allow that. It's all staged. It's all sort of nonsense, and it's just entertainment. It isn't an actual deep debate. It's just entertainment. So when I go at people, and even on Twitter, I mean, these guys, they're sitting by the computer. They've got the time to look stuff up. And I've had debates with media members that, they're not even using real stats. Like, they're throwing stuff out that's just provably false. I had one with a guy that, he's on Get Up a lot. I won't mention his name because it was DMs and it was private. But even in the DMs, he's throwing out fake stats at me. I'm like, dude, it takes 5 seconds to go to Pro Football Reference or ESPN and just check what you're saying. You're not even using real stats. And he's like, oh, okay, well, what about this? And he throws out another one. And I'm like, it took me 3 seconds to check, and it's fake. And he's like, yeah, well, we don't need to talk about that then.
Right? Like, it's insane. It's absolutely insane.
So kind of going off, Jameis's time with the Buccaneers, obviously it's come to an end. Your opinion, obviously, I think the people who actually, maybe watch Bucs football over the last 5 years will the answer to this. But did the Bucs actually do enough to help Jameis? Because it seems like the defense, the offensive line, the run game, they were always kind of poor. He always had a lot of weapons, and they'd always point out, media members always point out the fact that he's always had Mike Evans, but I mean he's never a fantastic defense. He's never really had a fantastic running game. The offensive line's normally pretty bad in Tampa. So, like, I guess my question would be, in your opinion, like, did the Bucs do enough? And if they didn't do enough, I guess maybe how can a team like New Orleans, if let's say he takes over in New Orleans next year, how are they better set up to kind of serve a player like Jameis?
Sure. There's some guys out there that will say, failed Jameis on purpose, or sort of like conspiracy theory nonsense. Jason Light, he did. He loved Jameis, and he absolutely believed in him. And to be honest, Jason Light believed in him too much. And I'm not saying that as an insult to Jameis. I'm sort of saying that as an insult to Jason, because he drafted him number 1 overall, and he just said, he basically put the ball in his hands and said, carry us to victory. We'll get you a couple weapons, and then just go win shootouts. Well, that's not a recipe for success for anyone. And when I say that, a lot of times people will say, well, Dan Marino could do it. Well, okay, 1, Marino, of course, didn't win a Super Bowl. But 2, people forget that when Dan Marino was a young quarterback, he had a great defense. People just completely forget that. They think Marino and Duper and Clayton, and that's all they remember. But if you go and look it up, I mean, the Dolphins had a fantastic defense. Brett Favre, when he was young, the Packers had a really good defense. People forget these things. So with Jameis, what the Bucs failed in, they failed to build a complete team around him. They gave him a couple weapons. They expected him to win shootouts, but they never built an actual team, and that's because they're a terrible organization. They just are.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a huge article about how they're the losingest they're the losingest franchise in North American sports history. Any sport in any country in America, they're the losingest franchise. And so I had a graphic that I put out a while back, and the media sort of kind of ran with it in a good way, and they started comparing Peyton and Jameis a lot, which was cool. But, Peyton Manning is a guy, he didn't experience a ton of team success. Everybody points to Brady having so much more team success. And Manning, it took him a while to get going. But even when you look at Manning, you take out the rookie years when Jameis obviously won a lot more games than Peyton. And Peyton had a very rough rookie season, through 28 picks. But you look at their next, their second, third, fourth, and fifth year. And I would say the Colts sort of failed Manning as well. They didn't build that great a team around him, even though he went from one Hall of Fame running back in Marshall Faulk to another one in Edgerrin James. And he had Marvin Harrison, and he did have some weapons. But his average team rushing rank, it was 17th over those next 4 years. Jameis's Bucs are 26th. I mean, that's just garbage. Peyton's team rushing yards per attempt rank was 15th over those 4 years. Jameis's Bucs, 29th. There's almost no team worse. And then you look at defense, Peyton's Colts, they were 18th in yards against and 8th in points against. Not good, not great, right around middle of the pack. Jameis's Bucs, 25th in yards against, 25th in points against. I mean, it's basically been Jameis against the world. And he wore that shirt a couple years ago, and even the Tampa media sort of crushed him for it. And said, how dare he wear that? Well, that's his life, man. It is Jameis against.
That's exactly right. I remember the workout shirt, Jameis against the world. He got crushed for that. But what else? What hasn't he got crushed for? I want to ask a question about quarterback progression. We see a lot of quarterbacks who are one-hit wonders come into the NFL. They come and go. Derek Anderson, Derek Carr was in the MVP chase not too long ago. I don't think many people would remember that. But Jameis's year that he's looking to recreate was his first year in the national spotlight at Tallahassee as a redshirt sophomore, I believe it was. Why is it that Jameis hasn't been able to replicate that first year or even first game results, like I said, against Pitt, where he was darn near perfect? Why hasn't he been able to replicate great performances like that?
Well, I'm not sure he'll ever do that again. I mean, you're talking about, an undefeated season than a Heisman, which would be, the equivalent in the NFL would be an MVP. So, I mean, if I'm a betting man, I'm betting against, Jameis ever going 19-0 in the NFL, winning the Super Bowl, and MVP. So when you start out on that, high of a level, really you have nowhere to go but down. Now, I know, he's still as confident as ever, and he said that in recent interviews and stuff, and he's looking to get to that. Again, undefeated, Heisman, and then also, BCS title game MVP. That would be the equivalent of going undefeated in the NFL with an MVP and then a Super Bowl MVP. So I don't know that ever happens for anybody. But I would say that, the progression has happened, in the NFL. Like I said, he is the youngest Pro Bowl quarterback ever. And then he hasn't gone back to the Pro Bowl, but easily could have his second year. He was better in his second year. The team was better. They only missed the playoffs on a tiebreaker. His third year, he suffered a nasty shoulder injury that the Bucs sort of botched, and they had him play through. And Jameis is just a yes coach. He's a yes coach kind of kid. He's not going to say no. So they wanted him to play. He played. He got hurt even worse. That was a mess. But even in that year, he only played 11 full games. He led the NFL in 300-yard games. And had he actually played the full season, he would have blown away Brady for the passing crown, because his average yards per complete game was like 317. He would have had a 5,000-yard season back as a 23-year-old. So he's always been that gunslinger guy who can go out there and drop 300 yards in his sleep. But he needs a complete team around him. And that Florida State team, it was fantastic. I mean, it had a decent running game. It had a fantastic defense. And you put a quarterback with a nice team, and if that quarterback's legit, that team will go far. And that's what we NFL all the time. And we even see complete teams with garbage quarterbacks. Mark Sanchez, for example, with the Jets, or Blake Bortles with the Jags. Those are fantastic teams. They're built well. Even last year when Tannehill came in, the Titans made the trade for Tannehill, and I said that's all they need. They're only a quarterback away from making a Super Bowl run. And some of the Mariota fans that follow me, they kind of got mad. But I said, hey, I've never switched my story on Marcus. I've said since he was at Oregon till today, gimmicky game manager. And you give Tennessee a legit quarterback, watch out, that team can do some damage. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, Tannehill took over and took the lead by storm, and they almost made the Super Bowl. So quarterbacks need a complete team around them. No quarterback carries a bad team. People point, like I said, they'll it didn't happen. They'll point to Elway. It didn't happen. He had a great defense as well. And he didn't really start winning Super Bowls until Terrell Davis gave him an amazing run game. Yeah. So I am happy to see Jameis sign with the Saints. I know the Steelers were after him. I know they offered him more. I'm happy to see him stay in the South and go to New Orleans. Sorry. And it's a fantastic organization. I was worried that he was going to sign with the Jaguars. That worried me, because he could have signed there. He could have put up, I'd say 4,500 to 4,800 yards, somewhere in there. And he could have balled out. He could have put up some stats, but it's just a bad organization. And I don't know if they're going to win more than 4 games this year. And they may even try to tank for Trevor Lawrence, which I wouldn't blame them. So I was happy to see him sign with the Saints. And I talked about it in another interview. I think it was like 2 to 3 weeks before he ended up signing there. I raved about the Saints and what a great organization that would be, what a good fit that would be for him. So I was happy to see him go there.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about some of the bad organizations in the NFL, like the Jaguars, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What really showed me that the Bucs were just a terrible organization was when it came out this offseason with Jameis that he had laser eye surgery because he couldn't see. Like, what organization doesn't check their quarterback's eyes every year and make sure that he's able to see and whatnot. But what do you think in the NFL makes bad organizations bad? Because I know you said you study a lot of different teams and quarterbacks and stuff. What makes a bad organization bad in the NFL?
There are quite a few organizations. Like, all the fans, they sort of think that all teams are dedicated to winning the Super Bowl. That's not true. Most teams comprehend and realize that there may only be, I'd say, 6 to 8 teams going into every season that even have a realistic shot at winning the Super Bowl. So you're talking about 24 to 26 more teams that have no realistic shot at winning the Super Bowl. And most of those owners, it's a business. Fans are so in love with their teams, and their lives revolve so much around it, and I understand that. But it's not the same way for owners. It is a business. They're there to make money. And so you look at a guy like, I think it's Mike Brown out in Cincinnati, Carson Palmer will just go on and on about how terrible that organization is and that they don't really care about winning at all. And there's a lot of organizations like that. And with the Bucs, I've never really gone off on the Glazers. I'm not even upset in the least with the Glazers for signing Brady because they're businessmen, and I think that was a wise financial move. I think Brady brings them a massive revenue boost. I think you see they got a bunch more primetime games. The jersey sales are through the roof, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very wise financial decision to make a move like that. But you talk to people in the UK where the Glazers own a football team or soccer team.
Man, you.
They can't stand them. They say they're absolute terrible owners that only care about money. They don't care about winning. They don't care about the team. They don't care about the fans. They care about lining their pocketbooks. And so if that translates over to the NFL, well, there you go. They made a financial move, not a football move, and it probably will line their pocketbooks with some extra cash. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I think it could end up destroying their future. So,
and speaking to that, does adding Tom Brady and replacing Tom Brady with Jameis Winston, obviously they also added, Rob Gronkowski as well. Does that really make the Bucs, 3-4 games better to take them out of 10-6, 11-5, and get them to the playoffs? Is current Tom Brady really that much better than Jameis Winston?
Honestly, I think it's a downgrade at the quarterback position. As far as if you're just looking at a specific player, the thing is, I don't think that the Bucs are going to run the same offense at all. Arians can say what he wants, but I'm very interested to see every game the Bucs play, and I'm very interested to see how the stats shake out at the end of the year, because from my perspective, Brady is capable of, running the same offense as Jameis. He's not capable of making the same throws, let alone, at the rate that Jameis made them. Last year, Jameis two across the board in pretty much all distance categories. Average CAY, total CAY, average IAY, total IAY, air yards to the sticks, all of that. At the target, A-dot. Jameis was like second across the board to Stafford, who I compare the two of those, Jameis and Stafford, in many ways, not just in the way they play, but, number one overall picks to terrible organizations and then being failed by those organizations. So Jameis is that guy. He's number two across the board in those areas. Brady, on the other hand, in average CAY, he's 24th. In average IAY, intended air yards, 28th. Air yards to the sticks, so how far the ball goes to the markers, 28th in the NFL. I mean, Jameis blows them away at all of that. And then when you look at completion percentage, they're almost dead identical. I think 1/10 of a percent higher. And their bad throw percentages were tied. They were both third worst. So basically what that means is that Tom Brady is, to use like a basketball analogy, Tom Brady is shooting the same field goal percentage on layups that Jameis Winston is shooting jacking deep threes like Steph Curry. That's craziness to me. So Jameis, I mean, he's throwing the ball so much further than Brady on every single pass on average, and yet they're tied in bad throw percentage, and plus minus is where that goes to. A lot of people, when you watch talking head shows, again, I'll mention First Take because Stephen A. is sort of a repeat offender. He'll always talk about completion percentage. He doesn't know how to look up any advanced metrics at all. He'll just say his completion percentage was higher this year. Completion percentage is the most asinine, irrelevant, ridiculous statistic there is. It's completely irrelevant now that plus minus exists, because completion percentage, all it judges is whether a pass was complete. Well, if you're throwing 8 4-yard passes, I would hope at least 7 of those are complete. They're not going anywhere. If you're throwing 8 20-yard passes like Jameis, if you can complete 4 of those, that's pretty good. So plus minus looks at what is your completion percentage against what expected completion percentage would have been on those exact same passes. And when you look at it, Jameis was 16th in the NFL. So he's right average. He was better the year before quite a bit, but he's 16th in the NFL. Brady was 32nd. 32nd. I mean, so Jameis is more accurate than Tom Brady. The completion percentage is not look at. He's a more accurate thrower. He's got a much stronger arm. The thing I worry about with Brady, and I love Brady. I mean, I've been watching and studying Brady since college when he was at U. I mean, I love Tom Brady, and I'm very excited to see what he does. But the thing I worry about most with him, and that I thought would keep him out of Tampa, I thought he might, either decide to stay in New England or go to Indianapolis or Tennessee or even the Chargers. I think Tennessee would have been the best spot for him, but Tampa Bay is terrible. Jameis Winston is running for his life constantly. He was, and on top of that, he's good at it. You know, people see Jameis, he runs, so he has a funny way to run. You know, but
it's goofy.
but he tied for third in the entire NFL in yards per scramble with Russell Wilson for quarterbacks that had at least 30 scrambles. You know, Brady isn't even capable of doing that, so I'm not really sure how he's going to survive behind that line. You know, you watch a clip of Smith highlights, and it's scary. Brady could get just destroyed. And so I think the Bucs, before the schedules dropped, and even before the Brady signing, you know, I looked at just their common opponents, or I'm sorry, their 2020 opponents, and I thought that they were going to go about 11-5 if they kept everything good and they got a nice offensive lineman in the draft, which they did.
They did.
And then when they got Brady, I said they're probably still going to be right around that, 10-6, 11-5, somewhere in there. And the schedules dropped, and I saw that the Packers and the Raiders, who I thought were going to be wins because the Bucs are at home with the Packers, they both have a week off. You know, they're both coming off a week. So I sort of changed those to losses in my mind, and I sort of look at them as a 9-7 team now, which I think will probably be good enough to get them the 6th or 7th seed. At the moment, I have the 6th seed because I think they beat the Vikings at home. So if that happens, you know, there'll be a lot of Jameis bashers that say, well, see, they made the playoffs with Brady and they didn't with Jameis. Okay, it's a different year. They're going to have different players. The offensive line is going to be better. And again, I don't think they're going to run the same system. I don't think Bruce Arians is that crazy that he's going to tell Tom Brady, listen, you're not going to have a run game. We want you to throw a ton of deep balls more than anybody in the NFL, and we want you to scramble for your life and tie Russell Wilson in yards per scramble. If that's what he's going to do, Brady's going to die by week 5.
You're 100% right about that.
So there's the biggest talking point of Tom Brady going to Tampa. The biggest benefit to him has been the discussion of the weapons that he's going to have in Tampa Bay. It doesn't sound like you're a guy that's too high on the valuation of how much that's going to impact the overall team. We already went over the air yards per target. Obviously, that's going to have to go down, especially if he's running for his life, like he just very well may be. My question is, how much value do you put on the fact that Edelman coming into the Buccaneers would no doubt be at least the third wide receiver, maybe the 4th or 5th most important target on this team? How much value do you put into the fact that now he's going to have better receivers, better tight ends, despite not having the running game and the offensive line?
Honestly, not a lot, and I don't mean to insult any of the Bucs receivers, but they get very, very, very little separation across the board. Mm-hmm. Mike Evans especially is terrible. I mean, his rank is, I'd have to pull up my stats, but he's something like 116th on wide receivers in separation, which is just terrible. They also get very little yards after the catch. And these are the things that Brady has sort of relied on for the past, 20 years is being able to hit open guys that get separation, like Edelman, and then relying on their yards after the catch. And so he's not going to have that in Tampa. He's got Mike Evans, who's a magnificent talent. But Mike runs go routes, and he catches balls, and then he doesn't get many yards at all after the catch. I could see Evans sort of struggling a bit with Brady. I could see Evans maybe getting a little bit upset because I think Godwin is going to be the man. I think Chris is going to get most of the targets. He'll play out of the slot, which Brady loves to throw to the slot. And I think Evans could sort of be forgotten a little bit. The Gronk trade made sense to me at all. I saw a tweet from Bruce Arians' son, and I already know Bruce is mad at me because I stuck up for Bruce a lot during the season, and then with what happened at the end of the year and what I know went on behind the scenes and what he did at the owners' meetings, things of that nature, I said some things in interviews, and it got back to me that Bruce Arians was furious with me. So I saw his son tweet out about what a great trade the Gronk trade was, and I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said, no, it's not a great trade. It's a terrible trade. The guy retired. He went into wrestling. We have no idea if he's even going to play, half a year. You already have O.J. Howard and Cam Brate. You didn't even get to end. It would have been much more sensible to make the trade for Trent Williams, use the draft pick on another defensive stud. I mean, then just trade for a third tight end who was in wrestling. It was dumb.
He's also 30 years old.
Yeah, yeah. And Bruce Arians' son had a fit, and he kind of came at me and started swearing at me, and I spanked him pretty good really quick, and he ran away. And then his wife came after me. Bruce Arians' daughter-in-law came after me. And at first, I thought it was still Bruce Arians' son, and I kind of spanked him again. I realized it was his wife, and I was like, "Oh, I'll take it easy on you," And I was sort of nice, and she ended up liking my tweets, and she went away too. But
that's awesome, Mr. 101, a household name at the Arians dinner table. That's great to know.
For sure. All right, we got one more question for you. Final question. Again, thank you so much for joining our show tonight. It means the world. And I'm kind of putting you on the spot here for this one, but how many quarterbacks, just a rough estimate, how many quarterbacks right now in the NFL are you taking over Jameis? So, like, where would you rank him in that tier ranking over, like the guys, like obviously like Mahomes and all those guys, Watson, all those folks?
Well, I like the question. Usually when I see people rank quarterbacks and they'll put out lists, they say that they're ranking quarterbacks. Like, for example, Chris Sims, they'll say that they're ranking. What they're really doing is they're ranking quarterback plus coach plus system plus roster. And so very few people are actually ranking a quarterback. So what I like to do is I like to think of, what would a quarterback be if everything around him was just league average? If you take every single quarterback and you give him a league average coach, league average line, run game, defense, everything, what are they going to be? Because that should change everybody's rankings completely. And I get the feeling like with Chris Sims, whose rankings are just incredibly absurd. I mean, I think you can find third graders who could do better rankings. And Chris knows me too. He won't engage with me on Twitter, but he knows me. And I went at him just a little bit today. He had said something, and he's got Jameis at the moment ranked 33rd, and he's got Baker Mayfield 21st and Case Keenum 32nd, which is just so silly. And I said, this is the guy who has Brett Favre ranked higher than Joe Montana on a GOAT list. And yet he's got Jameis ranked below, Teddy Bridgewater and Baker Mayfield. Like, there's no logical consistency at all. If there's anybody that's Favre 2.0, it's Jameis. A gunslinger with all the talent in the world that trusts his arm too much. But he'll go out there and carry a team. So I do look at – I did some tiers. I don't have that computer with me at the moment. I did a tier last year. I don't even know if I ever posted on Facebook. But I'm sorry, on Twitter. But it was the way that I ranked quarterbacks was I had offense carriers was like the top tier, and then the bottom tier would be a simple game manager. And so that's kind of how I look at it. Is when you have a quarterback, do you consider him an offense carrier, or is he a game manager, or is he a guy that you want throwing maybe 30 times a game, something like that? So what goes into that is a really cool advanced metric called offensive share metric, and that determines what percentage of your team's yards did you personally account for as a quarterback? So it eliminates all the yards after a catch. It eliminates all rush yards, all that. Just what did you account for? And out of all the quarterbacks that started 16 games, the only quarterback that accounted for a higher percentage of his team's offense than Jameis was Russell Wilson. That's it.
Wow.
Patrick Mahomes was way down at like 17th because he gets a ton of yards after the catch. He's throwing short passes, and those guys are doing all the work. Lamar Jackson was down at 14th. They also have a nice system there, and I think I had said last year, even if Lamar's special because of his running ability. Even if you took away every single rushing yard Lamar had, the Ravens are still crushing the league in rushing yards per game. That's insane. Yeah. So he has a magnificent team around him. So to me, tier one quarterbacks are offense carriers, and so I look at guys like Russell Wilson, Jameis, Aaron Rodgers. I'll put Mahomes in there, although he doesn't carry his offense yet. He obviously, just watching him, he pops. He obviously has the ability to carry an offense, of course. He doesn't have to, which is a good thing for him in Kansas City, but he does have that ability. So I would put Jameis on a tier one as far as an offense carrier. And I think, everybody would say, even guys that don't like Jameis, like Chris Sims, again, Chris Sims can't stand Jameis, and yet when he's talking about it, he'll say, good Jameis is a top 5 quarterback. Good Jameis is the lead. And then he'll turn around and bad Jameis is the worst quarterback you've ever seen. And I've seen that a lot in the media too. And it's an extremely false narrative because bad Jameis is the same guy as bad Roethlisberger or bad Rivers.
Sure.
He's a guy that's going to get you a lot of yards, put up points on the board, but also turn the ball over a lot. He's not Nathan Peterman. He's not going to go out there and get you 80 yards and 3 points. So bad Jameis is still a gunslinger who's going to rack up some numbers for you. He's just going to turn it over too much, and a lot of that is what he's asked to do and the throws he's asked to make. But yeah, I have no problem with people putting certain quarterbacks ahead of Jameis at all. If somebody wants to put Russell Wilson ahead of him, Lamar's the reigning MVP. You can't not.
Sure.
Patrick Mahomes, even a guy like Stafford. I love Stafford. I think he's super underrated. And if somebody wants to put Stafford ahead of Jameis, I have no problem with that. I think Jameis is a bit more athletic, and he can avoid sacks a lot better and stuff like that. But Matt's, he's been in the league a lot longer, and he's got more experience. So I've got no problem with that. Carson Wentz, no problem with that. Deshaun, yes and no. I've seen enough of Deshaun where some of the stuff bothers me a bit, but he's in a good system. I know people hate Bill O'Brien as a coach, which is silly. The Texans went to as many playoff games without Deshaun for the 3 years before Deshaun got there than they have since he's been in the NFL. They don't have any more. They haven't done any better with Deshaun than they did with guys like Ryan Mallett, Brock Osweiler, T.J. Yates, Brandon Whedon.
That's fair. That's fair.
Deshaun's better than Deshaun himself is better than all those guys, but as a team, they haven't gotten any farther. And so I think their coach has done a fantastic job, although as a GM, he leaves you scratching your head thinking that he's got issues, but yeah. And then game manager quarterbacks, Derek Carr, Tom Brady. He is a game manager. He can pull off a special throw now and then. He does have ability. It's just his age. He can't do it very often. That's sort of the issue I think with the Bucs and the Arians offense too, is that even if they're going to call some of the shots that Jameis took, they just can't do it at the same rate that Jameis did it, because Brady can't do that. And then, like Teddy Bridgewater, I would put really at the bottom of that game manager list. I'm really interested to see what he does in Carolina, because they do have a great running game, and they drafted all defense, so who knows what happens with that. But he's a very, very, very limited quarterback. His arm strength is maybe the worst in the NFL, and that includes backups, and it's bad. And but he's a good decision maker, and he's always played with a really strong run game, and he should have it again with McCaffrey leading the charge there. But I know like Sims is a guy who has Bridgewater ahead of Jameis. That's insane to me. And any team that would have just average talent all across the board and start a guy like Bridgewater over Jameis, that's just craziness. Jameis is an offensive player kind of guy.
Absolutely insane.
We have our own saying for Teddy Bridgewater around here. We kind of believe, and this is a little messed up, but we kind of believe that he's like the JFK of quarterbacks, in the sense that if he didn't totally blow out his knee, we wouldn't really be talking about him anymore. He probably would settle in somewhere as a backup, and that would just be it for Teddy Bridgewater. He'd have a nice career as a backup, but because he blew out that knee, we're going to probably be talking about what he could have been for the next decade.
That's a good way to put it. I think actually him suffering such a terrible injury was a blessing in disguise for him. I mean, it's very possible that had he not, he never would have got the contract he just got. And he's going into a system that he's familiar with. I think that a lot of what they did with him, with the money and the contract, is based on his character. I think they're trying to build a program, sort of like college. Matt Rule's a college guy. I think they're trying to build a program in Carolina based on high character guys and guys that are going to be great for the team. And I think is that. But part of me thinks that it was a bad move for Bridgewater. I mean, obviously, you're guaranteed. I think he's guaranteed. I want to say $32 million. I know the check was like 63, but I think he's guaranteed around 32. And that's more than he's made in his entire career to date. So obviously, that's not a bad decision. But part of me thinks that he's going to sort of be thrown to the wolves. They're going to have a terrible 2020. They're by far the worst team in the NFC South. And if they are terrible, Trevor Lawrence or somebody like that could come in, and Bridgewater really may never play again. So I'm happy he got his money. I'm very happy for him for that. I think it might be a really bad on-field situation for him. Whereas Jameis, Jameis is the exact opposite. Diana Rossini from ESPN reported, and I didn't say a word about it because I don't like throwing starting quarterbacks that are in positions like that, like Minshew, under the bus with contract stuff. But Rossini reported that Jameis's camp told the Jags, you can't pay enough for him to sign with you. So everybody out there saying, oh, Jameis couldn't get any more money. No, Pittsburgh offered much more. Jacksonville paid way, way more. But Jameis wanted the Saints. He's got a ton of respect for Breeze, a ton of respect for Sean Payton, wants to stay in the South. His wife's family is from there. Oh. He's still in the same division. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. So, and he's not a guy that
potentially.
Yeah, and he's not a guy that needed the money. When Bridgewater signed with the Saints, he had only made, I think, $7 million, somewhere between $7 and $8 million for his entire career. Jameis has already made $47 million. He didn't need a big contract right now. He just
last year.
Yeah, so I think he's in a good position for the future. I don't think it'll take long at all to win over his teammates and win over the coaching staff. The offensive coordinator, recently was talking about him anyways, and they already get it. They already know what Jameis is about. I don't think it'll take long for him to win over the staff there. And I don't personally view Taysom Hill as a quarterback. I think he's a great football player. I don't understand I don't really even understand the concept of him being a starting quarterback. He hasn't done anything. I mean, he's thrown less passes than most third stringers.
Absolutely.
Mr. 101, I got one more question before we go.
Last question.
Last question. Seriously, thank you for your time. This has been truly insightful. The only reason why we're over right now is because you've A, been fine, and B, because I love hearing you talk. This has been fascinating. Can you just confirm for us real quick that you are, in fact, General Manager Jason Light of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? That'd be huge for us if we can break that news. I would love that.
No, definitely. Not the way I've been talking about him recently.
That would have been big for us.
All right, Jameis 101, thank you so much. If you're watching this, make sure you click the link in our description to buy his book, Jameis Winston Derangement Syndrome, How Media Bias Causes Us to Overlook the Start of a Hall of Fame NFL Career. Thank you again so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.
My pleasure, man. It was a lot of fun. You guys have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Seriously, thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Bye. All right, guys. So that was awesome. That was awesome.
Cool.
A lot of fun.
He knows so much about like stats and advanced stats and advanced metrics and stuff. So
he was saying a lot of things. A dot, CAY, IAY, completed air yards, intended air yards.
Bang, bang.
A lot of things that the average fan possibly watching may not know.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll put out a glossary we're gonna clip this. So maybe we'll put out a glossary so people know what he's talking about. But essentially what he was trying to say at this part was that Jameis Winston throws the ball down the field. That's right. Essentially what he was saying. And he does. I actually think his intended air yards last year was like second in the league. It was like 10.2. So he does throw the ball quite a bit down the field.
Right.
He got me hyped for Stafford 101 coming out too.
If Chris, our Lions guy, was watching this, Chris loves Stafford. So he's gonna be thrilled to hear that. But yeah, I mean he's Jameis 101. He kind of gets a bad rep from people, especially in the media and stuff, because they're like, why does he stand for Jameis Winston? But then you actually sit down with him and you have a conversation with him and you realize this dude knows more about quarterbacks than probably 99% of people out there. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. He, and obviously just talking with him, and obviously the Twitter account's Jameis 101, the book's Jameis 101, so he kind of lives and breathes off that Jameis brand, so to speak. But I mean, the dude, like you said, he knows his quarterbacks, and I mean he's even talked about other guys. He talked about how good Matthew Stafford is, which is 100% correct. Matthew Stafford's a great. Carson Wentz. I mean, again, good. These are some really good quarterbacks, and not always in the best situation. Wentz obviously a better situation than Stafford, but and more goes into a quarterback, especially as Giants fans. Me and Dan know this. Yeah. More goes into a quarterback than stats. Sometimes, when the team is really bad around you, the quarterback's going to throw a lot of interceptions. He's not going to look so good statistically because he's just trying to win the football game. Because that's what care about. That's what the quarterbacks
we witnessed that for years with Eli. I mean, Eli should have been the MVP in 2011. He didn't have anywhere close to the stats that Rodgers had, but he had 7 come from behind wins that year. he had the worst run game, one of the worst defenses in the whole league, and he carried the team to a Super Bowl. So like that's definitely the things that people don't realize, but people like Jameis, one of one, really do. So that was a great conversation. I'm so glad we had him on. And yeah, any closing thoughts from y'all tonight before we all had our separate ways and whatnot?
I was really hoping that he was going to say that he was Jason White.
Oh man,
I was
that would have
really
been so great for us. We would have beat Shefty to that one.
Yes. That would have been. We would have gotten like national breaking news if he was like, "Yes, Jason White."
The fact that was even a thing for last year was great. The fact that was even a thing.
It was awesome.
I'm not gonna lie. For the first like 2 minutes of the interview, I was really listening for it, like hoping that he would slip up and the modulator would go off, and I hear Jason White back. Didn't happen. But I had to ask him. I want to set the record straight.
Yeah, for sure. That's the hard hitting questions we ask you at 366 Sports. Well, that was awesome. We're gonna clip it. We're gonna get this on our YouTube channel. We're gonna get this around, and that was a really fun interview. It was a really fun time, and I hope everybody watching had fun. Make sure you're following us, liking us on Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff, and we'll see you guys soon. Have a great evening.
Peace.